Admiral Kellerman had decided she was out of place before she even entered the briefing room. His practiced eye swept over her compact frame and civilian clothing, already calculating how quickly he could dismiss whatever bureaucratic nonsense had landed her in his operational space. The morning briefing had been delayed 15 minutes for this interruption, and 17 of his most experienced operators sat waiting while he dealt with what was clearly some Pentagon desk assignment gone wrong. She stepped through the doorway with measured confidence, her movements precise despite the obvious scrutiny. The room fell into that particular military silence that meant everyone was watching and making immediate judgments. Kellerman noticed how her eyes swept the room once, cataloging faces and positions, before settling on him with unwavering directness. "What do we have here?" he said loud enough for the entire room to hear, his tone carrying that blend of authority and barely concealed irritation that came from 30 years of command. "Another Pentagon liaison who thinks she understands field operations." The comment drew a few quiet chuckles from the operators closest to his position, men who had learned to read their admiral's moods and respond accordingly. She remained silent, waiting for him to finish his assessment. Kellerman appreciated that much at least. Too many civilians came in talking immediately, tried to establish credibility through words instead of letting their presence speak first. But her silence also irritated him because it suggested she thought she had nothing to prove, which in his experience meant she had everything to prove. Lieutenant Commander Garrison shifted in his seat near the tactical display, already anticipating how this conversation would unfold. He had watched Admiral Kellerman dismantle overconfident Pentagon representatives before, usually with surgical precision that left them questioning their own competence. The woman standing in the doorway seemed unaware of what was coming, which made what was about to happen almost inevitable. Before we dive into whatever administrative matter brought you here, drop a comment and let us know what state you're watching from. Maybe you've witnessed similar moments where assumptions were made about someone's capabilities in your community. These situations happen everywhere, from corporate boardrooms to small-town meetings, where first impressions can be completely wrong. Kellerman leaned back in his chair, establishing the power dynamic with practiced ease. His operators were watching, learning, absorbing how their admiral handled interruptions to critical mission planning. The woman had not been invited to sit, had not been offered any courtesy, and seemed completely comfortable with that fact, which only increased his certainty that she did not understand her position. "So tell me," he continued, his voice taking on that particular tone reserved for people he intended to dismiss quickly, "what exactly qualifies you to be in a room with operators who have earned their place through blood and qualification?" The question hung in the air like a challenge, and several of the SEAL team members straightened slightly, recognizing the verbal territory their admiral was claiming. Master Chief Kowalski, seated near the door, had seen this routine enough times to know how it typically ended. Pentagon representatives usually stammered through their credentials, mentioned their security clearances, or tried to invoke the authority of whoever had sent them. They rarely understood that Admiral Kellerman was not questioning their paperwork, but their right to occupy space with men who had proven themselves in ways that could not be measured by bureaucratic standards. The woman's expression had not changed since entering the room. She stood with her hands relaxed at her sides, her posture suggesting neither defensiveness nor aggression, simply waiting for the Admiral to finish his preliminary assessment. That composure struck Kellerman as either remarkable confidence or dangerous naivety, and his experience suggested the latter was far more likely. "You know what," he said, deciding to accelerate the process. "Let's start with something simple." His voice carried across the room with that command authority that made junior officers straighten automatically. "What's your call sign?" The question was delivered with just enough mockery to make it clear he expected either no answer or something appropriately civilian and unremarkable. Several operators exchanged glances, recognizing the trap their admiral had just set. Call signs in the special operations community were earned through actions that could not be fabricated or assigned by desk personnel. They represented recognition from peers who had witnessed capability under conditions that revealed true character. Anyone with a legitimate call sign would have stories that could be verified, experiences that could be cross-referenced, a reputation that preceded them through the tight-knit community of elite operators. Chief Petty Officer Martinez, positioned near the communications equipment, had watched Admiral Kellerman use this same question to expose fraudulent contractors and overconfident intelligence personnel. The call sign question was particularly effective because it forced people to either admit they had no operational experience or claim credentials that could be immediately verified or debunked by the men in the room. The woman's silence stretched for another moment, and Kellerman felt his initial assessment solidifying into certainty. She was clearly searching for an appropriate response, probably trying to decide whether to admit she had no call sign or attempt some fabrication that would only make her position worse. Either way, this interruption to his mission briefing would be resolved quickly, and his operators could return to discussing matters that actually affected their upcoming deployment. "I asked you a question," he said, his tone sharpening with the authority of someone accustomed to immediate responses. "What call sign do you operate under?" The emphasis on the word operate was deliberate, designed to highlight the gap between administrative personnel and those who actually conducted operations in hostile territory. The silence that followed Admiral Kellerman's question stretched across the briefing room like a held breath. She had not moved, had not shifted her weight or changed her expression, but something in her stillness suggested she was considering more than just how to answer. Her eyes remained fixed on the Admiral with that same unwavering directness, as if she were measuring something about him that had nothing to do with his rank or position. Lieutenant Commander Garrison found himself studying her face, looking for the telltale signs of someone caught between truth and fabrication. He had interrogated enough hostile assets to recognize the micro-expressions that preceded deception, the slight tightening around the eyes, or the barely perceptible shift in breathing that indicated someone was about to lie. But her expression remained completely neutral, neither defensive nor aggressive, simply patient in a way that suggested she was accustomed to being underestimated. "The Iron Widow," she said finally, her voice carrying clearly across the room without any need for emphasis or dramatic delivery. The words fell into the silence like stones into still water, creating ripples of recognition that spread unevenly through the assembled operators. Some faces remained blank, the call sign meaning nothing to them, while others showed the first flickers of something that might have been surprise or disbelief. Admiral Kellerman felt his certainty waver for the first time since she had entered the room. The Iron Widow was not a fabrication or a desperate invention. It was a call sign that carried weight in certain circles, attached to operations that existed only in classified files and whispered conversations between operators who had been present for events that officially never happened. But the woman standing before him looked nothing like the legend he had heard described in fragments over the years. Master Chief Kowalski's reaction was more visible than the others. His eyes widened slightly before he caught himself, his professional composure reasserting itself as he processed what he had just heard. The Iron Widow was not just a call sign, but a ghost story in their community, someone whose actions had been witnessed by people he trusted, but whose identity had remained deliberately obscured through layers of operational security and deniable operations. Chief Petty Officer Martinez leaned forward almost imperceptibly, his attention suddenly focused with laser intensity on the woman who had just claimed one of the most feared call signs in recent special operations history. He had heard stories from operators who claimed to have worked alongside Iron Widow, tales of precision that bordered on supernatural and a willingness to accept casualties that made even hardened SEAL team members uncomfortable. The call sign belonged to someone who had operated in places that did not exist on official maps, conducting missions that served purposes too sensitive for normal chains of command. Iron Widow was associated with operations where the objective was not capture or intelligence gathering, but elimination of problems that could not be solved through conventional military action. The legend suggested someone who could disappear entire networks of hostile assets without leaving evidence or witnesses. Kellerman realized that every operator in the room was now watching his response, waiting to see how their admiral would handle a situation that had just become exponentially more complex. If she was lying, the deception was so audacious that it demanded immediate and decisive action. If she was telling the truth, then he had just spent the last several minutes publicly dismissing someone whose operational record made his own decorated career look conventional by comparison. "You expect me to believe that," he said, but his tone had lost some of its earlier certainty. The Iron Widow is a myth, a composite of different operations that got turned into legend through repetition and exaggeration. His words carried conviction, but several of his operators were now looking at her with expressions that suggested they were not entirely convinced by his assessment. She had not reacted to his challenge, had not offered additional proof, or become defensive about her claim. Instead, she continued to watch him with that same patient directness, as if his disbelief was exactly what she had expected and was simply waiting for him to process the information at his own pace. That reaction bothered him more than anger or frustration would have, because it suggested a confidence that came from knowing something he did not. The Iron Widow legend had emerged from operations in Eastern Europe during a period when official American military presence was politically impossible, but certain problems required solutions that only highly trained operators could provide. The stories described someone who could infiltrate hostile territory, eliminate high-value targets, and extract without leaving any trace of American involvement. The precision was supposedly so complete that target organizations would collapse from within while appearing to suffer from internal power struggles. Lieutenant Commander Garrison remembered a conversation with a Delta Force operator who claimed to have provided overwatch for Iron Widow during an operation in Moldova. The man had described watching someone move through an enemy compound like smoke, neutralizing sentries and security systems with efficiency that made even special operations forces look clumsy by comparison. But he had never seen Iron Widow's face clearly, had never been briefed on identity or background, had simply been told to provide support for someone whose capability was beyond question. The stories always followed the same pattern. Operators would be assigned to provide support or coordination for Iron Widow without ever receiving a full briefing on identity or background. They would witness actions that seemed impossible given the constraints and opposition, then be debriefed with instructions that their reports would be classified at levels that made normal special operations secrecy look transparent by comparison. Chief Petty Officer Martinez had heard a Navy intelligence officer describe Iron Widow as someone who could make a terrorist cell leader disappear from a safe house surrounded by bodyguards and security cameras, leaving behind a scene that looked like the man had simply walked away from his own life. The precision was supposedly so complete that investigating authorities would find evidence of planned departure rather than violence or coercion. Admiral Kellerman found himself caught between his initial assessment and the growing possibility that he had made a serious error in judgment. The woman's composure had not wavered despite his challenge, and her claim was specific enough to be easily verified or debunked through channels that several people in the room had access to. If she was lying about being Iron Widow, the deception would be exposed within hours through informal networks that connected all special operations personnel. But if she was telling the truth, then he was facing someone whose operational record included missions that existed in the darkest corners of American foreign policy, operations so sensitive that even admiral-level security clearances provided only fragmentary access to the details. The tactical communications specialist seated near the back of the room had gone completely still, his face draining of color as he processed what he had just heard. Petty Officer First Class Chun had been part of a signals intelligence operation in Kazakhstan 18 months earlier, providing encrypted communication support for what his briefing officers had described as a priority asset elimination mission. He had never seen the primary operator, had only provided radio coordination from a position 3 kilometers away, but the call sign had been burned into his memory because of what happened next. Chun remembered the radio traffic from that night with crystalline clarity. The primary operator had requested communications blackout at 2300 hours, standard procedure for final approach to target. But instead of the expected check-in at the predetermined extraction time, There had been complete silence for 14 hours. His commanding officer had begun preparing contingency extraction scenarios when Iron Widow finally broke radio silence with a simple message that the entire target network had been neutralized and cleanup crews could move to secondary positions. When the cleanup teams reached the target location, they found 7 high-value assets dead from what appeared to be a coordinated internal power struggle. Security cameras showed the targets arguing among themselves before violence erupted, but the timeline made no sense because the arguments appeared to begin simultaneously in different locations across the compound. The precision suggested coordination that should have been impossible for internal enemies who had been under constant surveillance by hostile intelligence services. Admiral Kellerman noticed Chen's reaction and felt his own certainty continue to erode. Petty Officer Chun was not someone given to dramatic responses or emotional displays, and his current expression suggested he was processing information that changed his understanding of the situation completely. The Admiral had learned to read his personnel well enough to recognize when someone was connecting dots that led to conclusions he might not like. Master Chief Kowalski was conducting his own mental inventory of Iron Widow stories, trying to separate verified accounts from speculation and legend. He remembered a conversation with a Marine Force reconnaissance operator who claimed to have provided overwatch for Iron Widow during an operation in Syria. The Marine had described watching someone infiltrate a heavily defended position and eliminate 6 targets in sequence, but the deaths had been spaced over 4 hours and appeared completely unrelated to each other until the pattern became clear afterward. The Marine had sworn that Iron Widow never fired a shot, never engaged in direct combat, but somehow orchestrated a sequence of events that resulted in the target organization destroying itself from within. The precision had been so complete that Syrian intelligence services spent months investigating the incident as internal treachery rather than external intervention, never suspecting that American assets had been involved at all. Lieutenant Commander Garrison found himself recalculating everything about the woman standing before them. If the Iron Widow stories were true, then they were in the presence of someone whose operational capability exceeded anything in conventional special operations training. The legends described someone who could manipulate hostile organizations into eliminating their own personnel while appearing to be nowhere near the scene of action. But the woman claiming to be Iron Widow looked nothing like the shadowy figure he had imagined. She appeared to be in her early 30s, compact but not physically imposing, with an unremarkable appearance that would blend into any civilian environment. There was nothing in her presentation that suggested the kind of lethal capability associated with the call sign she claimed, which was perhaps exactly the point. Chief Petty Officer Martinez had begun to notice details about her appearance that he had initially overlooked. Her clothing was civilian, but cut in a way that suggested easy movement and concealed carry capability. Her shoes were practical rather than fashionable, designed for extended walking and quick movement across varied terrain. Her hair was styled to appear casual, but would remain manageable under a variety of operational conditions. More significantly, her positioning in the room demonstrated an awareness of sight lines and exit routes that came from training rather than accident. She had chosen a spot that provided clear observation of all personnel while maintaining access to the door and positioning herself beyond the immediate reach of the closest operators. The choices appeared casual, but suggested someone accustomed to operating in potentially hostile environments. Admiral Kellerman realized that his initial assessment had been based on assumptions about appearance and gender that might have blinded him to indicators that should have been obvious. The Iron Widow legend had never included physical descriptions, had never provided details about age or background, had focused entirely on operational results that seemed impossible until they were accomplished with surgical precision. The stories always emphasized how Iron Widow appeared to be in multiple places simultaneously, orchestrating complex sequences of events that required intimate knowledge of target psychology and organizational dynamics. The capability suggested someone who could blend into any environment while maintaining operational awareness that allowed for precise manipulation of hostile personnel and situations. Petty Officer Chen finally spoke up, his voice carrying across the room with careful precision. "Admiral, I provided communication support for Iron Widow during Operation Sandcastle in Kazakhstan. The mission parameters and results match archived reports that are still classified above my clearance level." His statement carried the weight of someone who had been present for events that officially never happened, but whose details could be verified through channels that Admiral Kellerman had access to. The admission changed the dynamic in the room immediately. Chun was not someone who would fabricate operational history, and his reference to specific classified operations meant that verification was not only possible, but inevitable. Admiral Kellerman found himself facing the possibility that he had spent the last several minutes publicly dismissing someone whose operational record made his own decorated career look conventional by comparison. Lieutenant Commander Garrison was now studying the woman with professional interest rather than skepticism. If she was indeed Iron Widow, then her presence in their briefing room meant that whatever mission they were being prepared for had just escalated to a level that required capabilities beyond conventional special operations. The implications suggested that their upcoming deployment involved objectives that could not be accomplished through standard military action. The woman had remained silent during the exchange between Chun and Admiral Kellerman, neither confirming nor denying the petty officer's account. Her expression suggested that she was accustomed to having her identity questioned and verified through unofficial channels, and was simply waiting for the process to run its course before proceeding with whatever had brought her to their briefing room. Master Chief Kowalski realized that every operator in the room was now looking at their admiral, waiting to see how he would handle a situation that had become exponentially more complex than anyone had anticipated. The woman's claim was no longer unsupported assertion, but was being corroborated by personnel whose credibility was beyond question. Admiral Kellerman felt the weight of 17 pairs of eyes watching his response to Petty Officer Chen's revelation. His position as commanding officer demanded that he maintain authority while processing information that fundamentally challenged his initial assessment. The woman who claimed to be Iron Widow continued to stand in patient silence, apparently comfortable with the verification process that was unfolding around her without her participation. The tactical situation in the briefing room had shifted completely. What had begun as a routine dismissal of an unwanted Pentagon liaison had evolved into a potential recognition that they were in the presence of someone whose operational legend exceeded anything in conventional military experience. Admiral Kellerman realized that his next words would either demonstrate command wisdom or expose a serious failure in judgment that his operators would remember for the remainder of their careers. Lieutenant Commander Garrison had begun accessing classified databases through his secure terminal, running searches that would either confirm or debunk Chen's account of Operation Sandcastle. The verification process would take several minutes, but preliminary results were already indicating that such an operation had indeed occurred within the time frame and location that Chun had specified. The details remained classified above Garrison's clearance level, but the mission's existence was confirmed through official channels. Master Chief Kowalski was conducting his own assessment of the woman's credibility through unofficial networks that connected special operations personnel across all branches of service. He had sent discreet messages to contacts who would have knowledge of Iron Widow operations, requesting confirmation that could be provided without violating operational security protocols. The responses were already beginning to arrive, and their content was forcing him to reconsider everything about the situation. The first reply came from a Delta Force operator who had provided extraction support for Iron Widow during an operation in Romania. The message was brief but unambiguous. Iron Widow real, capabilities beyond conventional assessment, identity verified through official channels only. The operator included a reference number that Kowalski recognized as authentic verification code from Joint Special Operations Command. Chief Petty Officer Martinez had noticed that the woman's composure had not changed despite the verification process occurring around her. She appeared neither anxious about potential exposure nor satisfied by growing recognition, simply patient in a way that suggested she had experienced this sequence of events before. Her reaction suggested someone accustomed to having their identity questioned and verified through channels that required time and appropriate clearance levels. Admiral Kellerman made a decision that reflected both command pragmatism and personal integrity. Chun, your account of Operation Sandcastle will be verified through appropriate channels. Until that verification is complete, we proceed with the assumption that our visitor has legitimate credentials and operational authority. His words carried across the room with command authority, but also with an acknowledgement that circumstances had changed beyond his initial expectations. The woman nodded slightly, the first movement she had made since claiming the Iron Widow call sign. Her acknowledgement was minimal, but suggested approval of the Admiral's decision to suspend judgment pending verification rather than continuing to operate from assumptions that might prove incorrect. The gesture indicated someone who understood command dynamics and respected proper verification procedures. Petty Officer Chun felt a measure of relief that his account was being taken seriously rather than dismissed as fabrication or confusion. His experience during Operation Sandcastle had been classified at levels that prevented him from discussing details even with personnel who held significant security clearances. But the basic facts of Iron Widow's involvement could be confirmed through official channels that Admiral Kellerman had access to. Lieutenant Commander Garrison's preliminary database searches were revealing a pattern of classified operations that mentioned Iron Widow as a participating asset, but provided no details about identity, background, or specific capabilities. The references appeared in mission reports spanning 3 years and multiple geographic regions, suggesting someone who had been involved in a sustained campaign of operations that required the highest levels of classification and operational security. The verification pattern was consistent with what Garrison knew about deep cover assets who operated outside normal military chains of command. Iron Widow appeared to be someone who was deployed for specific missions that required capabilities beyond conventional special operations, then disappeared back into whatever organizational structure provided their operational support and security. Master Chief Kowalski received additional confirmations from contacts in different branches of special operations. A Navy SEAL from Development Group confirmed providing maritime support for Iron Widow during an operation in the Baltic Sea. A Marine Special Operations Regiment operator verified serving as backup extraction during an Iron Widow mission in Central Asia. Each confirmation included authentic verification codes that could not be fabricated or obtained without legitimate operational involvement. The accumulating evidence was creating a picture of someone whose operational reach extended across multiple theaters and whose capability had been witnessed by personnel whose credibility was beyond question. Admiral Kellerman found himself facing the reality that his initial assessment had been not just wrong, but potentially embarrassing in its presumption and lack of operational awareness. Chief Petty Officer Martinez was now studying the woman with professional interest rather than skepticism, looking for indicators that might explain how someone with her unremarkable appearance could have developed the legendary reputation associated with the Iron Widow call sign. Her physical presence suggested competence rather than exceptional capability, which was perhaps exactly the point for someone whose effectiveness depended on remaining unnoticed until action was required. The briefing room atmosphere had transformed from skeptical assessment to grudging recognition as the verification process continued to confirm rather than debunk the woman's claimed identity. Admiral Kellerman realized that whatever mission briefing they had been preparing for was about to become significantly more complex if it required the involvement of someone with Iron Widow's specialized capabilities. Petty Officer Chun was remembering additional details from Operation Sandcastle that had seemed insignificant at the time, but now carried greater weight in the context of Iron Widow's confirmed presence. The precision with which the target network had been eliminated suggested someone who understood organizational psychology and operational security at levels that exceeded normal intelligence training. Lieutenant Commander Garrison completed his initial verification searches and found consistent references to Iron Widow operations across multiple classified databases. While specific details remained above his clearance level, The pattern of references confirmed sustained operational involvement at the highest levels of classification. The evidence strongly supported the woman's claimed identity, while revealing the scope of capabilities that such recognition implied. Admiral Kellerman faced a choice between continuing to challenge someone whose credentials were being verified by multiple independent sources or acknowledging that circumstances required a fundamental reassessment of the situation. The secure communication terminal on Lieutenant Commander Garrison's desk chimed softly with an incoming priority message from Joint Special Operations Command. The timing was too precise to be coincidental, arriving exactly as verification requests were being processed through official channels. Garrison glanced at Admiral Kellerman before accessing the message, understanding that whatever information it contained would likely determine how this situation proceeded. The message was brief, but carried the authentication codes that marked it as genuine communication from the highest levels of Special Operations Command. Iron Widow identity confirmed through Operation Nightfall protocols. Asset currently assigned to classified mission requiring SEAL team coordination. Admiral Kellerman authorized for mission briefing upon verification completion. The message included reference numbers that Garrison recognized as authentic authentication from sources that could not be compromised or fabricated. Admiral Kellerman felt his remaining skepticism collapse as he read the message over Garrison's shoulder. Operation Nightfall protocols were reserved for assets whose operational security required protection at levels that exceeded normal special operations classification. The fact that such protocols applied to the woman standing in his briefing room meant that her capabilities and mission history were considered vital national security assets requiring the highest possible protection. Master Chief Kowalski had received additional confirmations through his unofficial network of special operations contacts. A reconnaissance operator from the Army's intelligence support activity confirmed providing surveillance support for Iron Widow during an operation in Belarus. The operator's message included details about Iron Widow's approach to target elimination that matched stories Kowalski had heard from other sources, creating a consistent pattern of verified operational involvement. The Belarus operation had involved the elimination of a human trafficking network that had been operating under the protection of corrupt government officials. Iron Widow had reportedly infiltrated the organization over a period of weeks, gaining access to leadership structures that had remained hidden from conventional intelligence gathering. The network's elimination had appeared to result from internal betrayal and power struggles rather than external intervention. Petty Officer Chun was remembering additional details from Operation Sandcastle that now carried greater significance. Iron Widow had requested communications blackout, not just for operational security, but because the mission involved psychological manipulation that required extended time periods to orchestrate properly. The target elimination had not been accomplished through direct action, but through careful manipulation that caused the organization to destroy itself. Chief Petty Officer Martinez had begun to understand why Iron Widow's appearance was so unremarkable. Someone whose operational effectiveness depended on infiltration and psychological manipulation would necessarily appear non-threatening and easily forgettable. The legendary capabilities were hidden behind a presentation that would allow access to hostile organizations without triggering defensive reactions or heightened security measures. The woman who claimed to be Iron Widow had remained silent throughout the verification process, neither offering additional proof nor showing satisfaction as confirmations accumulated. Her patience suggested someone accustomed to having their credentials questioned and verified through appropriate channels, understanding that operational security required such procedures even when they created temporary inconvenience or skepticism. Lieutenant Commander Garrison received another priority message, this one containing operational briefing materials that were classified above his normal access level. The message indicated that Admiral Kellerman was being granted temporary clearance for information related to Iron Widow's current mission assignment, which required coordination with SEAL team assets under his command. The briefing materials would be delivered through secure channels within the next hour. Admiral Kellerman realized that his morning briefing about routine training operations was about to be replaced by something significantly more complex and sensitive. The involvement of an asset like Iron Widow suggested objectives that could not be accomplished through conventional military action, requiring capabilities that existed at the intersection of special operations and intelligence work that officially did not exist. Master Chief Kowalski had compiled enough confirmations to satisfy even the most rigorous verification requirements. Operators from 4 different special operations units had confirmed providing support for Iron Widow operations, each describing capabilities that exceeded normal training and experience. The consistency of the accounts, combined with authentic verification codes, created an overwhelming case for the woman's claimed identity. The pattern emerging from the confirmation suggested that Iron Widow operated as a deep-cover asset who was inserted into hostile organizations for extended periods, gathering intelligence, and orchestrating internal conflicts that eliminated target networks without exposing American involvement. The precision required for such operations exceeded anything in conventional military training, requiring psychological insight and manipulation skills that were developed through specialized programs that most operators never encountered. Petty Officer Chun was beginning to understand why his communication support during Operation Sandcastle had been so carefully compartmentalized. Iron Widow's operational methods required extended periods of radio silence because the mission involved activities that could not be monitored or directed through normal command structures. The asset needed complete operational autonomy to accomplish objectives that required improvisation and psychological manipulation rather than direct military action. Chief Petty Officer Martinez noticed that the woman's positioning in the room had not changed throughout the verification process. She had chosen a spot that provided observation of all personnel while maintaining access to exits, but her stance suggested readiness rather than defensiveness. The positioning reflected operational awareness rather than social anxiety, indicating someone accustomed to potentially hostile environments. The briefing room atmosphere had shifted from skeptical challenge to professional recognition as the accumulating evidence confirmed the woman's extraordinary credentials. Admiral Kellerman found himself facing a situation that required complete reassessment of assumptions and expectations, understanding that whatever mission required Iron Widow's involvement would exceed anything his operators had previously encountered. Lieutenant Commander Garrison was processing the implications of having someone with Iron Widow's capabilities assigned to coordinate with their SEAL team assets. The operational requirements that would necessitate such coordination suggested objectives that existed in the darkest corners of American foreign policy, missions that required plausible deniability and results that could not be traced to official military action. Master Chief Kowalski understood that every operator in the room was now looking at the woman with a combination of professional respect and curiosity about what kind of mission would require her legendary capabilities. The presence of Iron Widow meant that their upcoming deployment involved objectives that could not be accomplished through standard special operations procedures, requiring someone whose operational methods existed beyond conventional military training. Admiral Kellerman prepared to formally acknowledge what the verification process had confirmed, understanding that his initial skepticism had been based on assumptions that had proven completely incorrect. The woman standing in his briefing room represented capabilities that exceeded anything in his 30 years of military experience, and whatever mission had brought her to his command would require him to operate outside his normal understanding of special operations possibilities. Admiral Kellerman stood slowly from his chair, the movement carrying the weight of someone who had just realized the magnitude of his misjudgment. The verification process had produced overwhelming evidence that the woman he had attempted to dismiss was not only legitimate, but represented operational capabilities that exceeded anything in his considerable experience. His 30 years of command had taught him to recognize when circumstances demanded immediate reassessment of position and strategy. "Iron Widow," he said, his voice carrying across the room with a formal recognition that should have been offered from the beginning. "I apologize for the initial skepticism. Your operational security obviously requires verification procedures that take time to complete properly. The acknowledgement was delivered with a dignity befitting someone who understood that command authority sometimes required admitting error and adjusting course based on new information. She nodded slightly in response, the gesture conveying neither satisfaction nor resentment, but simple acknowledgement that the verification process had reached its natural conclusion. Her expression suggested someone accustomed to having their identity questioned by authority figures who operated from incomplete information, understanding that operational security necessarily created such situations until proper channels could confirm credentials. Master Chief Kowalski felt a measure of respect for his admiral's handling of a situation that could have escalated into a career-damaging confrontation. Kellerman had recognized when evidence overwhelmed initial assumptions and had adjusted his position with a professionalism that marked effective command leadership. The moment demonstrated why the Admiral had earned the loyalty of operators who valued competence and integrity over rigid adherence to hierarchy. Lieutenant Commander Garrison was reviewing the operational briefing materials that had arrived through secure channels, absorbing information that was classified at levels he had never previously accessed. The mission parameters described objectives that existed at the intersection of special operations and intelligence work, requiring capabilities that conventional military training did not address. Iron Widow's involvement indicated that standard operational approaches had been deemed insufficient for the challenges they would face. The briefing materials revealed that their upcoming deployment would involve infiltrating an organization that had successfully resisted conventional intelligence gathering for over 2 years. The target network operated with security measures that had frustrated multiple attempts by traditional assets, requiring someone with Iron Widow's specialized capabilities to gain access and orchestrate the elimination from within the organization's own structure. Petty Officer Chan was remembering additional details from Operation Sandcastle that now provided insight into how Iron Widow approached seemingly impossible missions. The target elimination in Kazakhstan had been accomplished not through direct confrontation, but through psychological manipulation that caused the organization to eliminate its own leadership while believing they were responding to internal treachery rather than external intervention. Chief Petty Officer Martinez realized that Iron Widow's unremarkable appearance was a carefully cultivated operational asset rather than a coincidental characteristic. Someone whose effectiveness depended on gaining access to hostile organizations without triggering defensive reactions would necessarily present themselves in ways that appeared non-threatening and easily overlooked. The legendary capabilities were hidden behind a presentation that facilitated infiltration and manipulation. The woman who had claimed the Iron Widow call sign began to speak for the first time since her initial identification, her voice carrying the quiet authority of someone accustomed to briefing personnel whose operational success depended on understanding complex and dangerous situations. The mission you have been preparing for has been modified based on intelligence developments that occurred within the last 72 hours. The target organization has implemented new security measures that require different operational approaches. Admiral Kellerman listened with the focused attention of someone who understood that Iron Widow's presence meant their mission had escalated beyond conventional special operations parameters. Her involvement indicated objectives that required capabilities his operators did not possess, necessitating coordination between traditional military assets and intelligence work that operated outside normal command structures. The target network has been identified as responsible for operations that pose direct threats to American personnel and interests across 3 different geographic regions. Iron Widow continued. Conventional approaches have failed because the organization operates with compartmentalized security that prevents traditional intelligence gathering from gaining access to leadership structures and operational planning. Master Chief Kowalski understood that they were being briefed on a mission that would require his operators to provide support for activities they might not fully understand or directly participate in. Iron Widow's operational methods necessarily involved approaches that exceeded normal military training, requiring trust and coordination without complete operational visibility. Lieutenant Commander Garrison was processing the implications of supporting someone whose capabilities had been confirmed by multiple independent sources, but whose operational methods remained largely unknown to conventional special operations personnel. The mission would require adapting standard procedures to accommodate approaches that existed outside normal military doctrine. The organization maintains operational security through methods that include systematic elimination of anyone suspected of external contact or intelligence gathering, Iron Widow explained. Traditional infiltration approaches have resulted in the loss of multiple assets who were identified and eliminated before they could gather actionable intelligence or gain access to leadership personnel. Chief Petty Officer Martinez realized that Iron Widow was describing a target that had proven resistant to conventional intelligence work because of security measures that anticipated and countered standard operational approaches. The organization's ability to identify and eliminate traditional assets suggested sophisticated counterintelligence capabilities that required different methods to overcome. Petty Officer Chun was beginning to understand why Iron Widow's operational history included extended periods of radio silence and autonomous action. The targets she was assigned to eliminate operated with security measures that made normal command coordination impossible, requiring someone who could function independently while orchestrating complex psychological manipulation over extended time periods. Admiral Kellerman asked the question that every operator in the room was considering. What specific support do you require from my personnel? The inquiry was delivered with the professionalism of someone who understood that Iron Widow's mission parameters would determine how his assets could be most effectively utilized. Iron Widow's response would define how 17 highly trained special operations personnel would be integrated into a mission that operated according to principles they had never encountered in conventional military training. The coordination would require trust and adaptability that exceeded normal special operations procedures, demanding that seasoned operators function according to parameters they might not fully understand but would be required to execute with precision. The briefing room had become completely silent as every operator waited to learn how their skills and training would be applied to objectives that required capabilities beyond their considerable experience. Iron Widow's presence had transformed what they had expected to be routine deployment preparation into something that would challenge their understanding of what special operations could accomplish. Iron Widow moved to the tactical display at the front of the briefing room, her movements precise and economical as she accessed the secure presentation system. The screen illuminated with satellite imagery of a compound located in what appeared to be mountainous terrain, the resolution clear enough to show individual structures and defensive positions. The target location was obviously selected for isolation and natural defensive advantages that would make conventional assault extremely difficult. Your team will provide overwatch and extraction support from positions approximately 2 kilometers for the primary target. She began, her voice carrying the calm authority of someone who had briefed similar missions multiple times. Direct assault on the compound would result in unacceptable casualties and would likely trigger the elimination of high-value intelligence assets that represent the primary mission objective. Admiral Kellerman studied the imagery with the tactical eye of someone who had planned countless special operations missions. The compound's defensive positioning suggested an organization with sophisticated understanding of military tactics and access to resources that exceeded typical criminal or terrorist networks. The natural terrain advantages were augmented by constructed defensive positions that indicated professional planning and significant financial resources. Master Chief Kowalski was analyzing the approach routes visible in the satellite imagery, identifying potential sniper positions and observation points that would provide effective overwatch capability while maintaining sufficient distance to avoid detection by compound security measures. The terrain offered excellent concealment opportunities for small teams, but would require careful coordination to maintain communication and mutual support. The target organization operates under the designation Crimson Network. Iron Widow continued, advancing to the next slide, which displayed organizational charts and personnel photographs. Intelligence analysis indicates a hierarchical structure with compartmentalized operational cells that maintain minimal contact with central leadership. The security measures include systematic elimination of anyone suspected of external contact or intelligence compromise. Lieutenant Commander Garrison was processing the implications of supporting a mission against an organization that had proven capable of identifying and eliminating traditional intelligence assets. The Crimson Network's counterintelligence capabilities suggested professional training and resources that exceeded typical criminal organizations, requiring operational approaches that could circumvent sophisticated security measures. Chief Petty Officer Martinez noticed that the organizational chart displayed leadership positions identified only by operational designations rather than names or photographs. The anonymity suggested security measures that prevented traditional intelligence gathering from identifying key personnel, creating challenges that would require infiltration and internal manipulation to overcome. The compound houses approximately 40 personnel at any given time, with rotating shifts that maintain constant security coverage, Iron Widow explained. External surveillance has identified standard patrol patterns and defensive positions, but internal security measures remain unknown because no asset has successfully penetrated the organization's operational structure. Petty Officer Chun understood that Iron Widow was describing a target that had successfully resisted multiple intelligence operations, creating a situation where conventional approaches had proven inadequate. The mission would require capabilities that existed outside normal special operations training, necessitating coordination with methods that his experience had not previously encountered. Your primary responsibility will be maintaining secure perimeter positions that provide early warning of external threats while remaining undetected by compound security, Iron Widow continued. Secondary objectives include providing extraction support if operational parameters require emergency withdrawal from the target location. Admiral Kellerman asked a tactical question that was central to understanding their role in the mission. What is your method of infiltration and internal manipulation? The inquiry reflected his need to coordinate support activities with operational approaches that his training had not previously addressed. Iron Widow's response carried the measured tone of someone explaining complex procedures to personnel who lacked the specialized background to fully comprehend the methodology. Infiltration will be accomplished through social engineering that exploits organizational recruitment practices and internal power dynamics. The elimination phase will involve psychological manipulation that causes the organization to eliminate its own leadership while believing they're responding to internal treachery. Master Chief Kowalski realized that Iron Widow was describing operational methods that existed at the intersection of psychology, intelligence work, and special operations. The approach required understanding of human behavior and organizational dynamics that exceeded military training, demanding skills that were developed through specialized programs that most operators never encountered. The timeline for the operation is flexible because the internal manipulation phase cannot be precisely predicted or controlled, Iron Widow explained. Your overwatch positions must be maintained for potentially extended periods while avoiding detection by security patrols that follow irregular patterns designed to frustrate external surveillance. Lieutenant Commander Garrison was calculating the logistical requirements for maintaining concealed positions over extended periods while providing effective overwatch and extraction support. The mission parameters would require careful planning of supply and communication procedures that could function without compromising operational security or revealing their presence to hostile surveillance. Chief Petty Officer Martinez understood that they were being assigned to support someone whose operational timeline could not be predicted using conventional special operations planning methods. The mission would require adaptability and patience that exceeded standard deployment parameters, demanding sustained performance under conditions that most operators had never experienced. The compound's security measures include electronic surveillance systems that monitor approaches from all directions, Iron Widow continued, advancing the detailed imagery that showed sensor positions and communication equipment. Your infiltration and positioning must be accomplished without triggering electronic detection systems that would alert compound personnel to external surveillance. Petty Officer Chun was analyzing the electronic surveillance coverage visible in the imagery, identifying potential blind spots and approach routes that might allow undetected infiltration to Overwatch positions. The security systems appeared sophisticated and professionally installed, suggesting resources and expertise that exceeded typical criminal organization capabilities. Admiral Kellerman understood that his operators were being assigned to provide support for a mission that would challenge every aspect of their training and experience. The coordination with Iron Widow would require trust and adaptability that exceeded normal special operations procedures, demanding that seasoned personnel function according to parameters they had never previously encountered. The success of this operation depends on maintaining complete operational security while providing support for activities that you may not directly observe or participate in, Iron Widow concluded. Your effectiveness will be measured by your ability to remain undetected while ensuring that extraction and emergency support capabilities are available when required. Master Chief Kowalski realized that every operator in the room was now understanding the magnitude of what they were being asked to accomplish. The mission would require skills and patience that exceeded their considerable training, demanding performance under conditions that would test their professional capabilities in ways they had never previously experienced. The tactical display shifted to show detailed terrain maps with elevation contours and vegetation coverage that would affect approach routes and concealment opportunities. Iron Widow manipulated the imagery with practiced efficiency, highlighting specific geographic features that would determine how the SEAL team could establish effective Overwatch positions without triggering the compound's sophisticated detection systems. Admiral Kellerman studied the terrain analysis with growing appreciation for the operational complexity they were facing. The mountain environment offered excellent concealment possibilities, but also created communication challenges and extraction difficulties that would require careful planning and coordination. The natural defensive advantages that protected the compound would also complicate their ability to provide effective support if emergency situations developed. Master Chief Kowalski was calculating approach times and positioning requirements based on the terrain features visible in the satellite imagery. The Overwatch positions would need to provide clear observation of the compound, while remaining beyond the range of electronic surveillance systems that monitored all obvious approach routes. The positioning would require night movement across difficult terrain that offered limited concealment during daylight hours. The Crimson Network recruitment process involves extended evaluation periods that require potential assets to demonstrate loyalty through increasingly dangerous assignments, Iron Widow explained. My infiltration will necessarily involve participating in activities that may appear to compromise mission objectives, but are essential for gaining access to leadership structures and operational intelligence. Lieutenant Commander Garrison understood that Iron Widow was describing an approach that would require his team to maintain Overwatch while observing activities they might not understand or approve of. The infiltration process would involve moral ambiguities that exceeded normal special operations parameters, requiring trust in methods that conventional military training did not address. Chief Petty Officer Martinez was analyzing the compound's defensive positions and patrol patterns visible in the surveillance imagery. The security measures appeared professionally planned and implemented, suggesting an organization with access to military expertise and resources that exceeded typical criminal networks. The defensive positioning would make direct assault extremely costly, even with overwhelming numerical superiority. The psychological manipulation phase cannot begin until I have gained sufficient access to observe internal power dynamics and identify vulnerabilities in organizational relationships, Iron Widow continued. The timeline may extend for weeks or months, depending on security measures and the complexity of interpersonal relationships within the leadership structure. Petty Officer Chun realized that Iron Widow was describing a mission that could require sustained Overwatch support for periods that exceeded normal deployment parameters. The SEAL team would need to maintain concealed positions and operational readiness, while Iron Widow conducted infiltration and manipulation activities that could not be predicted or controlled according to standard military timelines. Admiral Kellerman asked the logistical question that was central to planning extended operations in hostile territory. What supply and communication procedures will maintain operational security during extended deployment? The inquiry reflected his understanding that supporting Iron Widow's mission would require approaches to logistics and command coordination that his experience had not previously addressed. Iron Widow's response demonstrated the careful planning that supported her seemingly impossible operational record. Supply requirements will be met through preposition caches that provide 30-day sustainability without external resupply. Communication will be limited to emergency protocols that maintain operational security while ensuring coordination capability during critical phases. Master Chief Kowalski understood that they were being asked to operate with minimal external support while maintaining readiness for activities they could not predict or prepare for using conventional training. The mission would require self-sufficiency and adaptability that exceeded standard special operations procedures, demanding sustained performance under conditions of uncertainty and isolation. The compound's electronic surveillance includes motion detectors and thermal imaging systems that monitor all approach routes within a 3-kilometer radius, Iron Widow explained, highlighting detection zones on the tactical display. Your infiltration must be accomplished during specific weather conditions that degrade sensor effectiveness while providing sufficient concealment for movement across open terrain. Lieutenant Commander Garrison was calculating the precision timing required to coordinate infiltration with weather patterns that could not be predicted with certainty weeks in advance. The operational window would be determined by meteorological conditions that were beyond their control, requiring flexibility and patience that exceeded normal mission planning parameters. Chief Petty Officer Martinez noticed that the compound surveillance coverage included overlapping sensor zones that eliminated obvious infiltration routes and required approaches through terrain that would challenge even experienced special operations personnel. The positioning would need to be accomplished through careful analysis of sensor capabilities and environmental factors that affected detection probability. The success probability for conventional assault approaches has been calculated at less than 15% with acceptable casualty rates, Iron Widow continued. The organization's defensive measures are designed specifically to counter traditional special operations tactics, requiring approaches that operate outside their security planning assumptions. Petty Officer Chun understood that Iron Widow was explaining why her unconventional methods were necessary rather than optional for accomplishing mission objectives. The target organization had proven capable of defeating traditional special operations approaches, creating situations where psychological manipulation and infiltration were the only viable methods for achieving successful outcomes. Admiral Kellerman realized that his operators were being assigned to support activities that existed at the limits of what special operations could accomplish. The mission would require capabilities and endurance that exceeded their considerable training, demanding performance under conditions that would challenge their understanding of what military operations could achieve. The elimination phase will involve orchestrating internal conflicts that cause the organization to eliminate its own leadership while believing they are responding to legitimate security threats, Iron Widow explained. Your role during this phase will be providing extraction support if the manipulation triggers defensive reactions that compromise operational security. Master Chief Kowalski was beginning to comprehend the psychological complexity of Iron Widow's operational methods. The approach required understanding of human behavior and organizational dynamics that exceeded military training, involving manipulation techniques that could predict and control group behavior with surgical precision. Lieutenant Commander Garrison understood that they would be supporting someone whose capabilities had been confirmed by multiple sources, but whose methods remained largely beyond their experience or training. The mission would require trust in approaches they could not fully understand, while maintaining readiness for contingencies they could not predict. The briefing room atmosphere had become intensely focused as every operator absorbed information about a mission that would challenge every aspect of their professional capabilities. Iron Widow's presence had transformed their deployment from routine special operations into something that existed at the intersection of military action and psychological warfare. The tactical display shifted to show real-time intelligence feeds from surveillance assets already positioned near the target compound. Iron Widow accessed the feeds with security credentials that bypassed normal authentication procedures, revealing monitoring capabilities that had been observing Crimson Network activities for weeks without the operator's knowledge. The imagery showed personnel movement patterns and defensive rotations that indicated an organization operating with military-level discipline and security awareness. Admiral Kellerman watched the live feeds with growing understanding of the intelligence resources that supported Iron Widow's operations. The surveillance network providing real-time information exceeded anything available to conventional special operations, suggesting coordination with intelligence agencies that operated outside normal military command structures. The capabilities implied support systems that existed at classification levels he had never previously accessed. Master Chief Kowalski studied the personnel movement patterns visible in the live surveillance feeds, analyzing behavior that would affect his team's ability to maintain concealed overwatch positions. The compound security appeared professionally trained and followed irregular patrol schedules designed to frustrate external surveillance attempts. The defensive measures suggested an organization with access to counterintelligence expertise that exceeded typical criminal network capabilities. The timeline for mission initiation has been accelerated based on intelligence indicating that Crimson Network is planning operations against American assets within the next 30 days, Iron Widow announced. Your deployment will commence within 72 hours, requiring immediate preparation for extended operations under conditions that may not allow for normal logistical support or command coordination. Lieutenant Commander Garrison felt the weight of mission parameters that eliminated the careful planning periods normally associated with special operations deployments. The accelerated timeline would require his team to prepare for extended operations while adapting to support requirements they had never previously encountered. The complexity demanded immediate focus on contingency planning for scenarios that conventional training had not addressed. Chief Petty Officer Martinez was calculating equipment and supply requirements for operations that could extend for months without predictable resupply opportunities. The mission parameters required self-sufficiency that exceeded standard deployment planning, demanding careful selection of equipment that would provide maximum capability while remaining sustainable over extended periods in hostile territory. The compound intelligence indicates that Crimson Network leadership has implemented new security measures following recent attempts by other agencies to penetrate their operational structure, Iron Widow continued. These measures include systematic background investigations of all personnel and enhanced surveillance of anyone displaying unusual interest in organizational activities or locations. Petty Officer Chun understood that Iron Widow was describing a target that had adapted to counter traditional intelligence gathering methods, creating security challenges that required approaches beyond conventional infiltration techniques. The organization's ability to identify and eliminate intelligence assets suggested sophisticated counterintelligence capabilities that demanded exceptional operational security and patience. Admiral Kellerman asked a question that reflected his growing concern about the mission's complexity and his team's ability to provide effective support. What contingency procedures exist if your infiltration is compromised or if the psychological manipulation fails to achieve the desired outcomes? The inquiry carried the weight of command responsibility for personnel who would be operating beyond the reach of normal extraction and support capabilities. Iron Widow's response demonstrated the calculated risk assessment that characterized her operational approach. Contingency planning includes multiple extraction routes and emergency protocols that provide alternatives if primary objectives cannot be achieved through infiltration and manipulation. However, the mission parameters require acceptance that some outcomes may not allow for conventional extraction procedures. Master Chief Kowalski realized that Iron Widow was describing a mission where success could not be guaranteed through traditional military planning, and where failure might result in consequences that exceeded normal operational risks. The assignment would require his operators to function with uncertainty and potential isolation that challenged their training and experience. The live surveillance feeds showed Crimson Network personnel conducting what appeared to be defensive exercises and security drills, suggesting an organization that maintained constant readiness for external threats. The activities indicated military-level training and coordination that would make any direct confrontation extremely dangerous, even with significant numerical and technological advantages. Lieutenant Commander Garrison was processing the implications of supporting someone whose mission involved risks that could not be calculated using conventional assessment methods. Iron Widow's operational record provided confidence in her capabilities, but the current mission parameters suggested challenges that exceeded even her considerable experience. Chief Petty Officer Martinez noticed that the compound's defensive preparations included equipment and personnel positions that suggested expectation of sophisticated attacks, rather than simple criminal enforcement activities. The security measures appear designed to counter special operations approaches, indicating an organization with detailed knowledge of American military capabilities and tactics. The psychological profile analysis of Crimson Network leadership indicates personalities and relationship dynamics that provide opportunities for manipulation, but the complexity requires extended observation and interaction before effective strategies can be implemented, Iron Widow explained. The infiltration phase cannot be abbreviated without significantly reducing success probability. Petty Officer Chan was beginning to understand the patience and precision required for Iron Widow's operational methods. The approach demanded understanding of human psychology and group dynamics that exceeded military training, requiring someone who could predict and manipulate behavior with scientific precision over extended time periods. Admiral Kellerman faced the decision that would commit his operators to a mission that existed at the limits of what special operations could accomplish. The assignment would require trust in methods they could not fully understand, while maintaining readiness for outcomes they could not predict. The professional stakes involved both mission success and the safety of personnel operating beyond normal support capabilities. The compound surveillance indicated increasing activity levels that suggested Crimson Network was preparing for significant operations of their own. The timing created urgency that eliminated careful preparation periods while demanding immediate deployment to prevent hostile actions against American interests. The pressure removed normal planning margins and required immediate commitment to courses of action that could not be reversed once initiated. Master Chief Kowalski understood that every operator in the room was now facing assignment to a mission that would challenge their professional capabilities in ways they had never experienced. The coordination with Iron Widow would require adaptation to methods and timelines that existed outside their training, while maintaining performance standards that could determine the success of objectives with national security implications. The briefing had reached the point where Admiral Kellerman needed to make command decisions that would commit his personnel to operations they could not fully understand or control. Iron Widow's presence had transformed routine deployment preparation into something that existed at the intersection of special operations and intelligence work that officially did not exist. Admiral Kellerman stood at the tactical display, his 30 years of command experience weighing against the unprecedented nature of what Iron Widow was proposing. The mission parameters exceeded every conventional operational framework he had encountered, requiring him to commit his most experienced operators to support activities they could not fully understand or control. The decision would define not only the mission's outcome, but his legacy as a commander who either demonstrated exceptional judgment or catastrophic overreach. The live surveillance feeds continued to show Crimson Network preparations that suggested imminent hostile operations against American interests. The intelligence indicated that their window for preventive action was closing rapidly, creating pressure that eliminated careful deliberation in favor of immediate commitment to courses of action that could not be reversed once initiated. The timing forced decisions based on incomplete information and trust in capabilities that existed beyond normal military experience. Master Chief Kowalski watched his Admiral process information that challenged fundamental assumptions about what special operations could accomplish. The mission would require his operators to function as support assets for someone whose methods operated outside their training, while maintaining performance standards that could determine national security outcomes. The professional responsibility weighed against operational approaches they had never encountered. "But there's one thing that doesn't make sense," Admiral Kellerman said, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had identified a critical inconsistency in the operational planning. "You're asking me to commit my best operators to support a mission where they cannot understand or participate in the primary objectives. How do I justify that level of risk for activities that exist outside normal military doctrine?" Iron Widow's response came without hesitation, delivered with the calm certainty of someone who had answered similar challenges from authority figures throughout her career. "Admiral, your operators have been selected specifically because their capabilities exceed normal special operation standards. The mission requires personnel who can adapt to unprecedented challenges while maintaining effectiveness under conditions that conventional training does not address." Lieutenant Commander Garrison felt the weight of being described as exceptional while simultaneously being told that his exceptional training was insufficient for what they were being asked to accomplish. The contradiction highlighted the gap between conventional military capability and the requirements of missions that existed in the darkest corners of American foreign policy. Chief Petty Officer Martinez was processing the implications of Admiral Kellerman's challenge, understanding that their commanding officer was questioning not just operational parameters, but the fundamental wisdom of committing SEAL assets to support activities they could not evaluate or control. The concern reflected legitimate command responsibility for personnel whose safety depended on understanding the missions they were assigned to execute. The surveillance feeds showed Crimson Network personnel loading equipment and vehicles in patterns that suggested imminent departure from the compound. The activity indicated that their operational window was closing even as they conducted mission planning, creating urgency that eliminated normal preparation periods and forced immediate decisions about commitment to objectives they could not fully comprehend. "Admiral, I need you to understand something about the nature of threats that conventional military operations cannot address," Iron Widow continued, her voice taking on intensity that had not been present during the technical briefing portions. "Crimson Network represents an evolution in hostile organization that requires responses beyond traditional special operations capabilities." Master Chief Kowalski recognized the shift in Iron Widow's presentation from operational briefing to something approaching personal conviction. Her tone suggested someone who had witnessed threats that conventional military planning could not adequately address, requiring methods that existed at the intersection of special operations and intelligence work that officially did not exist. The organization has successfully eliminated multiple intelligence assets using security measures that anticipate and counter traditional infiltration approaches, Iron Widow explained. Their capability to identify and neutralize conventional threats means that standard military responses will result in mission failure and unacceptable casualty rates among any personnel attempting direct action. Petty Officer Chun was remembering his experience during Operation Sandcastle, understanding that Iron Widow's methods had accomplished objectives that conventional approaches could not achieve. The precision and effectiveness he had witnessed exceeded normal military capability, suggesting someone whose operational record provided credibility for claims about missions that existed beyond standard doctrine. Admiral Kellerman faced the command decision that would determine how his career and his operator's safety would be remembered. The mission exceeded every framework he had been trained to evaluate, requiring trust in capabilities that had been verified through multiple sources, but whose methods remained largely unknown to conventional military planning. "Your concern about operator safety is legitimate and reflects appropriate command responsibility," Iron Widow acknowledged. But the alternative to this mission is allowing Crimson Network to execute operations against American personnel that will result in casualties we can prevent through methods that exceed conventional approaches but remain within acceptable risk parameters. Lieutenant Commander Garrison understood that Iron Widow was presenting Admiral Kellerman with a choice between known risks associated with unprecedented operational methods and unknown consequences of allowing hostile actions to proceed without intervention. The decision required weighing immediate operational challenges against potential strategic outcomes that could not be precisely calculated. Chief Petty Officer Martinez noticed that every operator in the room was watching Admiral Kellerman's response, understanding that their commanding officer's decision would determine whether they would be assigned to the most challenging mission of their careers or whether the operation would proceed without SEAL support and potentially fail due to inadequate coordination. The compound surveillance showed Crimson Network vehicles departing the facility in convoy formation, suggesting that whatever operations they were planning had entered final preparation phases. The timing eliminated additional deliberation and forced immediate commitment to intervention or acceptance that hostile actions would proceed without American preventive response. Admiral Kellerman's next words would determine whether 17 experienced special operations personnel would be committed to supporting activities that existed at the limits of what military operations could accomplish. The decision reflected not just operational judgment, but fundamental questions about the role of conventional military assets in missions that required capabilities beyond traditional training and experience. Iron Widow waited for his response with the patience of someone who understood that command decisions of this magnitude required careful consideration of factors that extended beyond immediate operational requirements. Her expression suggested confidence that the Admiral would recognize the necessity of approaches that exceeded conventional military doctrine when facing threats that conventional responses could not adequately address. The briefing room had become completely silent as every operator absorbed the weight of decisions that would determine whether their professional capabilities would be tested under conditions that exceeded their considerable training and experience. Admiral Kellerman's face had gone completely pale as the weight of Iron Widow's words settled over him like a physical force. The briefing room, which moments before had been filled with the tension of difficult decision-making, now carried the atmosphere of impending recognition. His hands gripped the edge of the tactical display as he processed implications that went far beyond operational planning and into territory that challenged his fundamental understanding of what threats America faced. Master Chief Kowalski noticed the change in his admiral's demeanor immediately. Kellerman's expression had shifted from professional skepticism to something approaching genuine alarm, suggesting that Iron Widow's explanation had connected with information or intelligence that the Admiral possessed but had not previously shared with his operators. The transformation indicated that the mission's significance exceeded what any of them had understood. The surveillance feeds showing Crimson Network's departure took on new urgency as Admiral Kellerman absorbed the full scope of what Iron Widow had revealed about evolving threats that conventional military responses could not address. His 30 years of experience provided context that allowed him to recognize patterns and implications that his operators might not immediately comprehend. Iron Widow continued with relentless precision, her voice carrying the authority of someone who possessed information that existed at classification levels beyond normal military access. Crimson Network's operational capabilities include biological weapons development and deployment systems that have been tested against civilian populations in 3 different countries. Their security measures exist specifically to prevent intervention before those weapons can be deployed against American targets. Lieutenant Commander Garrison felt his understanding of the mission's importance shift dramatically as Iron Widow revealed intelligence that transformed their assignment from complex special operations to national emergency response. The biological weapons threat elevated every aspect of the mission beyond conventional risk assessment and into territory where failure could result in casualties measured in thousands rather than individual operators. Chief Petty Officer Martinez was processing the implications of supporting a mission against an organization that possessed weapons of mass destruction and had demonstrated willingness to use them against civilian targets. The revelation explained why Iron Widow's unconventional methods were necessary rather than optional, and why conventional military responses had been deemed inadequate for addressing the threat. Admiral Kellerman's voice cracked slightly as he asked the question that every operator in the room was now considering. What specific biological agents are we talking about? And what is the deployment timeline? The inquiry carried the weight of someone who understood that the information would determine not just operational planning, but potentially national security responses that extended far beyond their current mission. Iron Widow's response eliminated any remaining uncertainty about the mission's urgency and importance. Modified hemorrhagic fever variants with enhanced transmission rates and resistance to current medical countermeasures. Field testing in Somalia and Yemen demonstrated mortality rates exceeding 60% in exposed populations. Deployment against American targets is scheduled within the next 18 days based on intercepted communications. Petty Officer Chun felt the blood drain from his face as he absorbed intelligence that transformed their mission from challenging special operations to desperate prevention of mass casualty events that could devastate American cities. The biological weapons threat explained why normal military responses had been abandoned in favor of approaches that existed outside conventional doctrine and operational planning. Master Chief Kowalski understood that Iron Widow was revealing information that explained why her legendary capabilities had been deemed necessary for addressing threats that conventional special operations could not counter. The biological weapons development represented an evolution in hostile capability that required responses beyond traditional military planning and into territory that demanded unprecedented operational approaches. The compound surveillance feeds now showed the last vehicles departing the facility, suggesting that Crimson Network's biological weapons development and deployment systems were being relocated to positions where they could not be intercepted through conventional military action. The timing indicated that their window for preventive intervention was closing with each minute of continued deliberation. Admiral Kellerman's decision crystallized with the terrible clarity that came from understanding the full scope of what they were facing. The biological weapons threat eliminated any option except immediate commitment to mission parameters that exceeded conventional military capability. The choice had been reduced to accepting unprecedented operational approaches or allowing mass casualty attacks against American civilians. Iron Widow, you have full operational authority and whatever support my personnel can provide, Admiral Kellerman said, his voice carrying the weight of command decisions that transcended normal military planning. The biological weapons threat requires responses that exceed conventional capabilities, and your methods represent our best opportunity for preventing catastrophic attacks against American targets. Lieutenant Commander Garrison felt the weight of assignment to a mission that would challenge every aspect of his training while potentially preventing biological weapons attacks that could kill thousands of American civilians. The revelation transformed their deployment from complex special operations to national emergency response that demanded performance beyond their considerable experience. Chief Petty Officer Martinez understood that every operator in the room had just been committed to supporting activities that would test their professional capabilities under conditions that exceeded conventional training. The biological weapons threat provided justification for methods that existed outside normal military doctrine, while demanding immediate adaptation to operational approaches they had never encountered. The briefing room atmosphere had transformed from professional tension to grim determination as 17 experienced operators absorbed the reality that their mission involved preventing biological weapons attacks against American civilians. Iron Widow's presence had been revealed not as operational enhancement, but as the only available response to threats that conventional military capability could not address. Master Chief Kowalski realized that Admiral Kellerman's decision reflected not just operational judgment, but recognition that some threats require responses that existed at the limits of what American military capability could accomplish. The mission would demand everything they could provide, while potentially preventing mass casualty events that would define American security for generations. Petty Officer Chun was processing the implications of supporting someone whose operational methods had been developed specifically to address threats that conventional responses could not counter. The biological weapons development represented exactly the kind of evolving hostile capability that required Iron Widow's psychological manipulation and infiltration techniques to overcome. Admiral Kellerman's commitment to the mission carried the finality of decisions that could not be reversed once operational deployment began. The biological weapons threat had eliminated every alternative except immediate acceptance of methods that exceeded conventional military doctrine, while providing the only viable approach for preventing catastrophic attacks against American targets. The transformation in Admiral Kellerman was immediate and complete. The man who had entered the briefing room prepared to dismiss an unwanted Pentagon liaison now stood before someone whose capabilities represented the difference between successful prevention of biological weapons attacks and mass casualty events that could devastate American cities. His posture straightened with the recognition that he was in the presence of operational capability that exceeded anything in his considerable experience. Iron Widow accepted his commitment with the same composed professionalism she had maintained throughout the verification process and mission briefing. The acknowledgement carried no satisfaction or vindication, simply the recognition that operational necessity had overcome initial skepticism and resistance. Her expression suggested someone accustomed to having authority questioned until circumstances forced recognition of capabilities that existed beyond conventional military understanding. Master Chief Kowalski watched his admiral's complete reversal with professional respect for command leadership that could recognize when circumstances demanded immediate reassessment of assumptions and priorities. Kellerman's willingness to commit his operators to unprecedented operational approaches demonstrated the kind of adaptive thinking that separated effective commanders from those who remained trapped by conventional doctrine when facing extraordinary threats. Lieutenant Commander Garrison was already accessing secure communication systems to initiate deployment procedures that would place his team in operational positions within the accelerated timeline that Iron Widow had specified. The biological weapons threat eliminated normal preparation periods and required immediate transition from mission briefing to active deployment in hostile territory, where they would support activities that exceeded their training and experience. Chief Petty Officer Martinez felt the weight of assignment to a mission that would challenge every aspect of his professional capabilities while potentially preventing biological weapons attacks that could kill thousands of American civilians. The revelation had transformed their deployment from complex special operations to national emergency response that demanded performance under conditions that exceeded conventional military planning. Iron Widow moved to the secure communication terminal and began accessing coordination networks that operated outside normal military command structures. Her security credentials bypassed authentication procedures that required admiral-level authorization, demonstrating access to resources and support systems that existed at classification levels beyond conventional special operations clearance. Petty Officer Chun was processing the implications of supporting someone whose operational authority had just been confirmed through the most dramatic circumstances he had ever witnessed. The biological weapons threat provided context that explained why Iron Widow's methods were necessary rather than optional, and why conventional military responses had been deemed inadequate for addressing evolving hostile capabilities. The tactical display updated with real-time intelligence feeds that showed Crimson Network convoy movements through mountain terrain that would complicate conventional interdiction efforts. The timing indicated that biological weapons development and deployment systems were being relocated to positions where they could not be reached through standard military action, creating urgency that demanded immediate commitment to operational approaches that existed outside normal doctrine. Admiral Kellerman addressed his operators with the gravity appropriate to personnel being assigned to prevent catastrophic attacks against American civilians. Gentlemen, you are being committed to a mission that exceeds every framework we have been trained to evaluate. Your effectiveness will be measured not by conventional military standards, but by your ability to adapt to operational requirements that exist beyond our normal experience. Master Chief Kowalski understood that his admiral was acknowledging the unprecedented nature of what they were being asked to accomplish while maintaining the command authority necessary to ensure effective performance under conditions that would challenge their considerable training and experience. The biological weapons threat provided justification for methods that existed outside conventional military capability. Lieutenant Commander Garrison completed the initial deployment coordination and began accessing logistical support networks that would provide equipment and supplies for extended operations in hostile territory. The mission parameters required self-sufficiency that exceeded standard special operations planning while maintaining readiness for activities they could not predict or control through conventional preparation. Iron Widow's coordination activities revealed support networks that operated with resources and capabilities that exceeded anything available to conventional military operations. Her access to real-time intelligence, logistical support, and extraction capabilities suggested organizational backing that existed at the highest levels of American national security infrastructure. Chief Petty Officer Martinez was calculating equipment requirements for operations that could extend for months, while supporting someone whose methods demanded adaptation to approaches they had never encountered. The mission would require everything they could provide while potentially preventing biological weapons attacks that would define American security for generations. The briefing room had been transformed from routine deployment preparation to emergency response coordination as 17 experienced operators prepared for assignment to activities that would test their professional capabilities under conditions that exceeded conventional military planning. Iron Widow's presence had been revealed as essential response to threats that conventional capability could not address. Before we conclude, if this story has moved you or made you think about the hidden heroes who protect us every day, drop a comment and let us know what resonated most with you. Maybe share if you've ever witnessed someone who is underestimated prove their extraordinary capabilities, or tell us about the quiet professionals in your community who do difficult work without recognition. Admiral Kellerman's final acknowledgement carried the weight of command decisions that transcended normal military authority and entered territory where national security required responses that existed at the limits of what American capability could accomplish. Iron Widow, your operational authority is confirmed and supported with every resource this command can provide. The biological weapons threat requires capabilities that exceed conventional military responses, and your methods represent our best opportunity for preventing catastrophic attacks against American targets. Master Chief Kowalski realized that every operator in a room had just witnessed a transformation that revealed how quickly assumptions about capability and authority could be overturned when circumstances demanded recognition of extraordinary individuals whose methods existed beyond conventional understanding. The Iron Widow legend had been confirmed not through demonstration of physical capability, but through revelation of operational necessity that exceeded normal military planning. The mission would proceed with Iron Widow's authority established beyond question and SEAL team support committed to preventing biological weapons attacks that could devastate American cities. Admiral Kellerman's initial skepticism had been replaced by complete recognition that some threats required responses that existed at the intersection of special operations and capabilities that officially did not exist. Iron Widow's composed acceptance of their support carried the quiet confidence of someone whose operational record had been earned through missions that prevented catastrophes most people would never know had been threatened. The biological weapons threat represented exactly the kind of evolving hostile capability that required her psychological manipulation and infiltration techniques to overcome, and 17 experienced operators would now provide whatever support her methods required to succeed.